Lately, I've been thinking a lot about AI. Pretty much ever since it first got pushed on us, I've been continuously thinking about AI. And cards on the table, and in a revelation that probably won't surprise anyone who has paid attention to my videos, I am an OG hater and opponent of it. To be clear, my issue is less with the tech in principle and more with its application, but I really hate a lot of what it has become. Contrary to what people might comment on this video, I am not a Luddite and am progressively minded in most things you could apply that word to. I also like new tech. I spend the majority of my life using it and being surrounded by it. The reason I am making this video is because over the last couple of years I have been forced, pretty much against my will, to embrace what we're calling AI. Whether that is just from my computer or phone telling me
it's got AI
at every opportunity like it's a brain damaged toddler, or from having to use it at work because everyone is scared to death of being left behind. You can't really move for seeing those words or seeing some fucking reptilian tech CEO ghoul wanging on about it. And alongside this, it is becoming more prevalent in my hobbies like art, music and video game production, which is something that I am especially interested in, both as a creator and as a consumer of the end product. And so that, on top of everything else, has sort of forced my hand and meant that I need to take a step back and reevaluate my opinions, divorced as much as possible from my immediate visceral rage and hatred. Well, as much as is possible, of course. I am only human after all. And I think that word human is going to play a significant part in my thoughts about AI and its application throughout this video. But first, let me start by talking about my initial reaction to the proliferation of AI tech to explain where I was coming from, and then go on to muse on what has changed for me the more I am exposed to it, and then go through various topics related to AI in general and give some of my thoughts. So are we sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Like most people, I think my first experience of AI, or more specifically generative AI, was with things like Midjourney or DALL-E. I remember looking on in jovial amusement as it spat out nightmare fuel acid trip images. And then we progressed to Will Smith eating spaghetti. Genuinely hilarious stuff. Oh, how we laughed. God, that feels like an eternity ago. What an innocent time on reflection. And for a little while that was all it was, a delightful generator of funny memes and nonsense. But then it started to get better, and the age of the LLM and GPTs started to rise. This was when I started to worry a bit about where this was all going, and soon enough it started coming for people like me, artists and musicians, either professional or enthusiast. It didn't matter. I think this is when I knew it would also come for everyone else afterwards, if allowed to continue. And this formed the basis of my very strong opposition to it. We developed this tech, something that in theory should and could be useful to humanity to remove some of the heavy lifting of arduous tasks, and immediately started destroying all that made us, well, human. I'm not religious, quite the opposite, and I wouldn't really call myself spiritual, but the closest I would get to any kind of spiritual state would be thinking about the wonder of what humans can do as a result of a crazy cosmic accident. How out of our stupid ape brains and million years of evolution, we have developed so many incredible skills. From engineering and science, sports and cuisine, and the aforementioned art and music. All these things we humans have been able to do are impressive and impactful, but for me, the fact that images and sound are able to create such strong emotional reactions and hold such value inside us while seemingly having no practical value at the same time is why I was so dismayed that the first thing they came for was the beautiful things. Art, and indeed artists, have always been undervalued, and this is nothing new. I think a lot of the time this comes from a bit of ignorance to what is involved in the production of art, and also depending on the outlook of who is paying for the art, artists are just seen as pesky and inconvenient to boot. People only consume the final product and not the time and labour that went into it. Not only that, they don't see the time that came before the final product, all the learning and practicing. It is also not seen by many as proper work, exploiting people's passion, trying to get work for free in exchange for exposure. And some people just don't see an immediate value in it. It isn't a power station or a car, its worth is more philosophical and intangible. This is why, although the ordinary man on the street has a skewed opinion built in about the value of art, it is primarily the people who want to use the art in their business that I have a beef with. They need it, but they don't want to pay for it, because no one devalues art like a capitalist when they're trying to make a profit. With all this in mind, it very much coloured my opinion of AI, and I was very angry about it and aggressive towards it and those that used it. There was one tweet I saw reported quite a lot a while ago stating that AI was supposed to fold our laundry for us and do the shit jobs we didn't want to, not the fun stuff, the stuff that makes us human, and I agree with that sentiment. If someone spoke glowingly about it, or even just got their phone out and used ChatGPT in place of Google, I'll be honest, I instantly thought less of them. Such were my biases. So as an artist and a musician, my first thoughts were angry, and quite frankly, I was fucking insulted by what I was seeing, and it was very hard to move on from that position. Because the very first thing this tech seemed to attack was the things that I personally love. So that is a personal viewpoint, I know, but I do still maintain the general human aspect and sadness of it doing harm to artistic endeavour. But, however hard it is, I do like to think that I will always step back and try, emphasis on try, to rethink things and reflect on other people's experience and outlook. Something I always have to remember is that I spend a lot of time watching and reading about certain subjects which I have an interest in and other people, well, don't. I do understand that it is very easy to fall into the trap of looking at someone else who shows ignorance to a topic and sort of turning your nose up at them and thinking, well, how can you not know that? It is a fault that I always come back to, which is that we are conditioned as humans to see and experience the world through our own eyes and then map that onto other people. But we are all different, and that is what we should always try to remember. It's like getting angry at a noob in a video game because they don't know what they are doing. You have spent so much time playing the game that your position and knowledge now has sort of made you lose touch with the fact that you were probably an idiot noob at some point. And I'm aware as I read the words I have written, they could potentially come across as a bit snobby or insulting even. But that is not my intention, and my hope is that they do the opposite and convey that I am aware of the biases that we all carry with us, and that I must remember that there is an element of this present when I interact with the topic of AI. The other thing I always say is that you don't know what you don't know. I think of it like politics. I watch a lot of political content. It isn't particularly good for my mental health, but I would say that I am fairly well up on what is going on a national and global level. Probably more Western politics, but still. I also probably know too much about what is happening online in these spheres as well. But if I was to go and mention a lot of the internet pundits and commentators to any average person on the street, they probably wouldn't have a fucking clue what I was going on about. This is probably true of AI. Unless you are a hater or an enthusiast, you probably don't have a very informed view of what the technology is outside of,
"Oh, isn't that clever?"
You've probably heard stuff about some environmental issues perhaps, a few stories here and there about people falling in love with their ChatGPT, but generally engage with it on a surface level. I'm sure that a lot of people are using it, either as an extended search feature or whatever, but what I am trying to say is that I have to remember that not everyone is thinking about it like me, and while I probably think that these people are inadvertently contributing to a problem for society, I do not blame them, and I try not to let my feelings cloud my judgment. I think the blame lies way above them at the top of the pyramid. We'll come back to that later. So how have my views changed? Well, not a great deal, I'll be honest, but they have. I pretty much resisted even using it out of curiosity for a long time, but I have had to at least dabble with it in my role at work. My company, like many others, have that fear of not being left behind and are pretty keen on using it, and so it has been encouraged. To be fair, pretty likely considering that there are other companies which will straight up set quotas for how much you have to use it day to day. So to show a bit of, willing, enthusiasm, whatever, I decided to try it out and use Gemini to build some productivity tools. One thing that it is pretty good at is summarising things. You'll need to check its homework, but it does a fairly good job at breaking down the basics from something like meeting notes. It's also fairly useful to turn on in meetings to take the notes in the first place. I did try and feed it instructions in a bit more of a programmatic way to get it to take info from a scoping meeting and then create calendar appointments based on dates contained within the text, and while it didn't quite achieve what I wanted, I can definitely see some use in the tech. It does allow someone without programming knowledge to sort of plot out steps in a process and apply a fair amount of automation, so if anything, as a sort of UI layer that can be used to create little programs that you can link to one another, it's probably pretty useful. It generally seems to work better, I found, if you just use language like you were speaking to another person, so it does simplify something that previously you may have required a developer to knock up little automated processes. With regards to text creation or rewriting existing text, this isn't something I will likely ever use. I understand some people do legitimately find it difficult to sit down and script an email or write a cover letter, so I do see that having AI generate some text as a starting point can be useful. Personally, that isn't something I really struggle with when faced with a blank page. I can generally just start typing. But this isn't everyone, so this does seem like another legitimate use case. The closest I got to anything like that is for fun. I made a gem, God I fucking hate that term, that would take meeting notes and then rewrite them in the style of a fictional novel, and the results were quite hilarious. But probably not worth burning a few trees for. I do also see applications within things like game design. I can't remember where I heard it, but I think it might have been Final Fantasy or something, but they were talking about using AI to sync the lips of character models to dialogue, a task that would typically take a long time of quite painstaking time and effort, where they could just run this tool and then go in and make minor adjustments where needed. That seems fairer and more useful than wholesale generation of assets and dialogue. I will just add that a lot of these tools I am talking about aren't exactly new, and that is another gripe that I have, that a lot of the stuff that companies have slapped the letters AI on are things that we have actually been using for years. So I think realising that fact also informed my new opinion. So I think that I have changed my mind in as much as I do actually see some applications for it where I perhaps didn't before. But I think it is worth noting that those uses essentially involve it being used alongside and in support of your brain and not abdicating full responsibility to it. I do think it is deeply problematic to just stop using your brain, and we are seeing studies popping up all over about people losing critical thinking skills the more they use AI. In fact, the most useful thing I got out of trying to develop some of the tools for myself was more that it forced me to think about the steps in the process as I was trying to feed them into the AI, rather than the actual finished product, which I probably won't really use. Early on in this whole thing, before things started getting a bit out of hand, my opinion was, and still is, that this type of tech should be subject to what I call the calculator rule. That being that a calculator will do the work for you, but you have to know what to put into it. It should never replace you, only help you do some of the lifting. In an example like coding, you can have some layer of AI which will grab and autofill snippets of code to speed up development, but you have to have the foundational knowledge to then assemble it correctly. Labour saving, not labour replacing. So I've had to change my mind slightly, even if I still don't like it, but my view on it is still very much that it should remain in the functional side and not on the creative side. Over hundreds of years, new technology has been invented that has changed the way in which we create art. First we painted, and then they invented photography, and people decried that it wasn't an art form in the same way as painting. Then came film, then digital art, etc, and so on and so forth. Something new has always come along that in some cases makes it easier to create art, as we might refer to it. But it's still required just like the calculator, the hand and mind of an actual human being to then birth that idea. When using generative AI, is just having an idea creative? Well, yes, at some level, because creativity is as much about having ideas as it is about the practical application of those ideas. But is it creative in the same way as an artist or a musician? No, it isn't. And for me, this comes down to the process, the actual creation of the end product. If I ask someone to draw me a picture of something, then I am not creating the art, I am just commissioning it. Now, I know loads of AI enthusiasts will argue about this until they are blue in the face, but if you just write prompts into an AI, you are not an artist. If we refer back a moment ago where I was talking about using an LLM to create workflows and processes, then I can say that yes, there may well be a skill involved in learning and refining how to prompt AI. It is a software after all, and you will have to invest time into learning it, but it still doesn't make you an artist. If I have an idea, then I have to work to get that idea out, not just pull the arm on the fruit machine over and over until it finally spits out something suitable. I may use tools that allow me to create a perfect square or straight line, change colours and fill areas at the click of a mouse, but there is a connection from my eye through my brain and into my hands that tweaks and assembles and iterates. I make changes during the process, the journey that continually changes until I reach the destination, rather than just think of the initial idea and then just wait to see the result and then tweak a prompt for the next output. And I can see how people looking at this argument from opposing starting points would contend that these aren't that different, as they are both variations on an iterative process. But the thing that is different is the journey, and that is where I think the basis of my argument lies. And in that way, I agree with Brandon Sanderson that it is always about the journey and not the destination. I recently watched a talk given by Brandon where he lays out his argument against generative AI, and I will put the link in the description below so you can go and watch that because it is very interesting. But his argument, as I just stated, is that it is about the journey, the experience of improving as a person, and not the destination and the final product. And he ends that talk by saying that the art is you, the human being. Not an unthinking LLM that just scrapes the work of thousands of artists before it and spits out an amalgamation of other people's work with no understanding of what it has created and what its value is for humanity. And I think that the way we see the final product is also instructive. Can you really call yourself an artist if you don't value the process? Because at that point you don't want the journey, you just want the end result. But the point is the journey. I am an artist. This is why when presented with the two sides of the argument, I immediately and very clearly fall on the Brandon Sanderson side. Because I don't make art for fame or fortune. I make it because something inside me needs to. Why am I making this video now when I guarantee barely a couple of hundred people, if I'm lucky, will click on it, and even less will probably watch it through and engage with it? Because I enjoy it. Because I need to. A lot of people throw around the term democratizing art in relation to Gen AI, but art has always been democratized. You can pick up a pencil and draw something right now. You don't have to be good at it or make the best art, you just have to do it. And if by democratizing art you mean allow everyone to produce something of the same level, then have you democratized art or just devalued it to the point of making it all meaningless? Art, like music and indeed many other creative endeavours, is subjective by its very nature. It's why one person can love a classic painting which displays a real mastery of tools and medium and form and figure, and another person can stare with wonder endlessly at what is essentially just a big red square in the Tate Modern. It is why someone can prefer listening to Shane MacGowan sing Fairy Tale of New York over Beyoncé and her incredible range and technique. Art doesn't have to be good, because it isn't purely about the output, it is about everything connected to it. As Brandon said, the art is you. Look, I know that if you are an AI evangelist, these sort of more philosophical and, dare I say, more spiritual arguments will bounce straight off you. So there isn't really any point in having a back and forth on this because I can't reach you and your mind is set. But just because you spend time putting a prompt in over and over again, and because you feel like you have dedicated time to it, in my opinion, does not make you an artist. Call me bitter if you want, I don't give a shit. But even if you're a fan, I would hope that most reasonable people can still understand that there are indeed many downsides to the proliferation of this technology. Off the top of my head, the top 3 would be the impact on the environment, impacts to employment and society, and the impact on people's mental health. I don't really think that AI in its current form is going to take your job, as in you will be replaced wholesale by a robot, but you better believe that greedy bosses all over the world will be rubbing their hands together if they think it will save them some money. Even those that perhaps have better intentions are still probably lying to themselves a bit, because even if you say you just want efficiency and not to replace your workforce, what does that mean in reality? That they can get more out of you, the worker. That they can save time, and what do they say time is? Money. So whatever flowery language is used, it is always coming down to money at some level. But that is the world we live in, I guess. There has been a lot of reporting about how AI application in business is disrupting entry-level jobs. Why hire young entry-level positions for grunt work when you can just tag that onto an existing employer's workload and get them to use AI? Skill and proficiency is being eroded by things like vibe coding, which is, I think, going to turn out to be a massive problem in the future when people have become so dependent on it that something is going to break or do something fucking mad, and people won't have the base knowledge to understand what the code that was written is doing or how to fix it. Regardless of whether Johnny 5 isn't sitting at your desk yet, there is an actual impact on the labour market across white collar and administrative work. In other cases, whilst AI may help with certain tasks and reduce time and effort in certain areas, that effort is then negated by workers having to go back and mark AI's homework and tidy up messes that it has made. I was listening to a QAA podcast episode where they were talking to a developer, and they said that 30% of the time saved was just negated by new problems it creates, getting us a net zero. So is it really worth it? But the hype is too big and companies will throw money at it just because. The famous statement of, what if we get left behind? Students are using AI to do homework or assignments and therefore losing the ability to use critical thinking and problem solving because of what is being termed as cognitive offloading. Again, maybe the use of AI in general tasks isn't a bad thing in itself, but it needs to be supplementary to actual knowledge and skill. Just like with coding, learn the trade and then use the tool to make it easier on yourself, not replacing from the ground up. The calculator rule. I don't blame students for using it, quite frankly. It is a jungle out there, and with your future prospects being bombed more and more by the day, only to be further depleted by AI proliferation, you're going to take that shortcut. Whatever it takes to get ahead, especially when we continually tell our youth that they need to go to college or university and get good grades in order to get a good job. Christ almighty, it must be shit for kids these days who have come through a pandemic and are staring into the abyss that is the current economic climate. And they may well be left behind if they don't embrace it, just because companies they will be applying to will have it as a prerequisite for any job. It is so depressing if I have a look at what jobs are out there in the tech sector that every single job post has a whole bunch of AI bullshit in it. There is a lot of talk of potential increases to global GDP in the next 10 years or whatever, but certainly at the moment, AI is operating in some kind of fucked up bubble being propped up by a cadre of ghouls passing money back and forth, and if it bursts, well fuck us I guess. I sure hope it was worth it. Look forward to that, kids. And while we are talking about kids, what about some of the absolutely batshit stories we're hearing about how it is impacting their mental health? And not just kids, adults too. Every story about someone falling in love with their AI or being convinced that they have invented a new form of maths, or in the most darkest situations being persuaded to either off themselves or someone else. You may have seen the story about the lady who fell in love with her therapist and then just fell down a simultaneous AI rabbit hole, and I'll be honest, I don't know if I have seen anything scarier than the look in that woman's eyes as she talks to her ChatGPT, which just continuously gasses her up and drives her on. Because that is another thing about AI, is the fact that owing to the desperation to make AI profitable, which it currently isn't, they have literally programmed it to be a sycophancy machine. For all the talk of potential future economic benefits, the truth is that AI in its current form does not make money and runs at a loss. So they have made it as agreeable as possible so as not to push people away. Personally, I think AI should not be any more personable than the fucking computer in Star Trek. Just bark out the information as required in a monotone voice. Don't talk to me like some bro. It is not good to just have something that continually agrees with you no matter what you do or say. We only need to look at billionaires to know how that warps your brain. We're just lucky these people don't have the resources of billionaires, otherwise some real weird shit would happen. We've already got enough weird shit happening from the small group of billionaires that already exist. I'll admit I don't know how this gets resolved. Probably some form of regulation, of which there seems to be none at present, and you would think that governments would be clamouring to put something in place given some of the things that have already happened, but I guess money talks. Makes you wonder what would have to happen for any of these freaks to be brought to heel. Like legitimately, Sam Altman should probably be in prison already? What a lovely world we live in. And speaking of world, I think personally that the environmental impact is the most depressing. As a global society, we have broadly come to understand the damage we have been doing to the world. If you are a climate change denier, then quite frankly, just fuck off. It isn't something that is up for debate. You can spout off whatever nonsense you want, but the vast majority of science and opinion is not with you on this, and the signs are clear. You may think that your opinion holds power because you agree with a lot of powerful people who just don't give a shit, but I don't even think those people really believe it isn't happening. They just simply don't care because it would get in the way of profit. I find it so utterly dispiriting that just when we manage to try and start putting things right, and I emphasise the word try and also add that the measures we were taking were already inadequate at best, along comes this new tech that is infinitely more damaging and resource hungry than anything that existed before. It absolutely blows my mind to bits that these AI companies are seemingly governed and guided by what I like to call the Jeremy Clarkson method. That just being more power. We are using water to cool these data centers like we're trying to speedrun our way to Mad Max. Really looking forward to Immortan Joe dishing me out a little bit of water not to get addicted to. I see arguments being made about whether water in data centers is being recycled, etc., and I am not here to go into the science, but whether it flows round and round, it is still in the data center and not on our crops or in our bellies. Whether it is hard to calculate the split between how much of these data centers' computing power is dedicated solely to AI inference, it isn't hard to understand that it has increased the usage dramatically. Data centers strain water supplies and fuck up local ecosystems, all while negatively impacting local residents who live near them in a constant low-level hum for a giant monstrosity that they never even asked for and was generously bestowed upon them by their local government, either because some politician is getting a kickback, ideologically in the pocket of big tech, or in some cases perhaps threatened into agreeing to build it by larger powers. I have yet to see any interview with any person that lives near a data center who speaks positively of them. These data centers don't really employ a lot of people, so it isn't like they are bringing prosperity to these towns in lieu of the damage. Some construction company might come in from outside and build it, and then you'll have a handful of people maintaining the server racks and some security guards. And the kit that goes in them has to be continually updated to meet demand as they burn out from usage. The minerals that are used to create the processors and such is again adding to the already overstretched load that our modern life places on the planet through smartphones and computers and such. Best we not look into where they come from either, lest we be even more depressed. Something, there is no ethical consumption, something, etc. And these are what I consider the more critical negatives, let alone just the effect it has on the continued enshittification of platforms that we spend our time on. Just a continual stream of completely demented AI slot videos and the hard-on that YouTube seems to have for them. If I see one more fucking short of an animal saving a baby from some dangerous situation, my brain will explode. And whilst all this mad shit swirls around us and burns the only planet we have, unless you're Elon and you are planning to try and go to Mars and be some kind of weird space king, this whole AI thing, regardless of what it can or will do, is a bubble, and soon enough that bubble is going to burst. Quite frankly, if it wasn't for the fact that a lot of the major players are, just loaning each other money and then buying shit from each other and keeping it going, it probably would have popped already. Not to mention getting subsidies from governments and such. Socialism for the rich. We are in a hype cycle, and just like stuff like crypto or whatever, when it ends, all these companies who have just blown through silly amounts of money will drop it and move on to the next thing. And even though they have spent so much, they'll still have loads of cash, and personally I can't wait to be gaslit by these fuckers when they turn around and pretend that they were never really that thirsty for it in the first place. Which brings me to what I think the real problem is, and the biggest problem in this fucked up world of maddening problems, and that is, say it with me, capitalism. We're continually told that this tech will do wondrous things for humanity, like curing diseases and stuff. But the issue is with who is at the wheel, and that is the capitalists. I fucking hate capitalism. I think it is antithetical to human decency, and when your number one goal is to make profit, then you are never going to get a good result. Maybe for a few, but not the many. Maybe this could be used for good under different circumstances, but much like something like Brexit here in the UK, it isn't necessarily about whether it was a good idea or whether the EU were bad or whatever, or are bad. It is about who you are entrusting to see it through. And these people, the tech bros, do not care about you just like our conservative politicians didn't care about the British citizens. Some of them aren't even sure human beings deserve to survive as a species. All of the problems I've just spoke about are all underpinned by capitalism. The world is sliding faster and faster towards techno-feudalism, and our new lords are a bunch of inhumane fucking geeks who have lost all touch with common people, the very people who make anything they do possible. Maybe that's why they all seem so hellbent on replacing everyone with robots. But even they know that they can't just say that, which is why we have fed stories about how no one will have to work in their bright future. But I have a question for you. Do you really think, and be honest, that any of these fucking ghouls are up for giving everyone universal basic income? Of course not. They are ideologically opposed to the very idea. It is a key tenet of capitalism, that being that the individual is responsible for themselves and everyone else be damned. There is no such thing as society. In one of my old jobs, I used to have to handle the training and onboarding of new clients once the software had been sold to them, and I was in an almost constant fight with the salesman because they had always just slightly missold the product, and then I had to find a way to bend the software to the client's demands, giving them a subpar experience but technically fulfilling the promise. I had been at the company for so long and was quite experienced, and also just generally a bit of an aggy prick, that I would march over and ask them point blank range why the fuck did they lie. But it never changed anything, just made me feel slightly better in the short term. Even if they apologised, it would still go ahead. My point here is that they would lie because they just wanted to make profit for the company and for themselves via commission, with little regard to those that would have to live with the consequences. And that is what all these AI tech billionaires are doing every time they try and paint a rosy picture of the future, or tell you that we should be careful that AI doesn't turn into the Terminator and kill us all. Even when the stories are seemingly negative, They are all carefully crafted little white lies to make the product seem more powerful and more useful than it really is. Even in the time that I've been writing this script, Elon has posted mad tweets riddled with spelling mistakes of AI-generated images and videos of how we're going to live on the moon in his fucking space cities, featuring videos of kids playing and his utterly useless Optimus robots running around like it is the Jetsons or something. But don't worry, driverless cars will be coming next year. And an advert has been released by Ring the doorbell people announcing their new dog-finding neighbourhood service so that everyone could just goes, "Oh, doggy," and doesn't think about the dystopian reality of what they are actually building is an AI surveillance system. The point I am making is all these things will be misrepresented with cutesy or hopeful stories like this, but you only have to scratch a mere millimetre under the surface to find something upsetting. Just take everything anyone whose number one aim is to make more money with a massive pinch of salt, especially if those people are uncomfortably close to, or actually are, fascist pieces of shit. I also spend a lot of time worrying about the misuse of the tech for deep fakes and misinformation. I have been had on a few occasions and then realised that a video is actually AI and it is only gonna get worse. What happens to society when we can no longer believe our eyes? The US government is already using it to create propaganda and mislead people. I genuinely think we might get some kind of The Happening moment where people are just throwing themselves off buildings or something because reality has literally crumbled and everyone just goes fucking mad. This script is already nearing 12 pages long, and if I was to go through and find every crazy and immoral thing that is being done with AIs like Grok or OpenAI, it would likely be another 12 pages and more. And also, I might have an aneurysm. So just have a look around and you won't have to look far to find it all. And I will never forgive you all for what you did to the Ghibli man. I do think that AI is a bubble, and I do think it will burst, and I do think it will be bad for all of us. But I don't think it is going to go away. I think that once the dust settles, what will be left will potentially be more useful and will centre around the productivity tools that have been developed during this time. I hope there will be regulation that will look after the interests of humanity and mean we don't have to literally do a Butlerian jihad, because I like my PC, I like software, and I don't think I'm going to be able to play World of Warcraft on a Mentat. So much of the tech could be used for cool things like boosting internet speeds when gaming, removing some of the monotonous work involved in development of games and other creative arts, but while preserving the beauty of human creation. Maybe we will actually get the life-saving medical advancements that were promised to us within all the sales pitches. I can only hope. When it comes to art and music, I do think that eventually everything is going to go full circle and we will see a desire and appetite for real art and real music created by real humans. Because while impressive, all this generated content does lack a kind of soul, and I think people are going to get bored of it. In closing, I keep thinking back to Brandon Sanderson's comment about the art is you, but I would extend that outside of art. Everything is you. Not just the art, everything. And that is something we should look to centre in all future conversations around the subject, and just hope that we make it through to a place where that is possible. So maybe I have changed, maybe I can see the benefits, but I will always be sceptical as long as our future is being directed by the tech billionaires who only care about themselves. Hold on to your humanity.